Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Stephen Faber has distrusted women since he was a child. His mother was to blame. His relationship with Camille was complicated and strained. The woman was known as demanding and intransigent to other people's shortcomings. Therefore, when in his youth he dropped out of college, his mother annoyingly showed him her contempt. For a whole year afterward, she nagged him and called him unemployed. Every day he heard the same phrase, "When will you get off my neck?" The last course left, and he didn't make it. A weakling. Life with such a woman was not pleasant. She couldn't accept her son's independence. So she put all the household chores on the boy's shoulders. But Stephen did not like to do household chores, and often under a plausible pretext to shirk the tedious work. In addition, she flooded him with criticism. Camille hated his long hair, which was shaved at the back of his head into a ponytail. She was infuriated by the careless style in Stephen's clothes. And most annoying of all was his nightlife, gambling online or going to the city's hot spots. But they weren't the guy's true hobbies. He simply found discharge in them when his mother had urgent business and she tightened her iron grip. Stephen enjoyed sitting at home, watching television, and reading books. Camille was a successful broker out of forking out decent money. Stephen, on the other hand, was wasting it. He was not wasteful, he just wanted to do everything to spite his mother. Since childhood, she considered her son a worthless person, worthless for nothing and weak character. Not once in her life did she consult with the boy growing up. The woman only told him how to live his life. But he was completely deaf to her moralizing, just did not allow the usurper to break his protective shell. It was a silent but stubborn protest. Sure, Stephen was used to the luxuries his mother surrounded herself with, but she did it out of pure selfishness, because everything in the house was arranged to her liking, and she was used to having her orders obeyed immediately. The mansion was 15 minutes from the city, near a small picturesque river surrounded by a coniferous forest. Stephen knew how to get aesthetic pleasure from communicating with nature, so he liked to walk around the neighborhood in the evenings. This habit was formed in his early childhood from the time when his father lived with them, and Stephen felt needed and loved. Even now, having become an adult and saying to himself the cherished word, his father, his soul, as if defending, becoming weak and receptive heart, warming the craving then and pleasant feeling of love and hope. Unlike Camille, his father Sam was the embodiment of the power of dignity and kindness. Many women looked up to him. You bet, such a specimen of enormous stature, majestic and muscular with a body in relief. He had lived and worked in the circus since he was a little boy. Such a monumental man dared not offend. He could not even get into a conflict situation that would make him angry. No one argued with him. This giant was a soft and kind dad. Next to him, Stephen felt protected, and he grew up with absolute fearlessness in his heart. He grew up very brave because his peers in kindergarten and at school looked up to his dad with subservience. They showed Stephen every respect and honor. His father's authority was unquestionable. It was worth people to look at him, and they immediately understood what real power is. Almost 10 years. Life with him suited Camille. Although there was no mutual understanding between the parents, they often quarreled and loudly clarified their relationship. The father did it calmly and dignified, and the mother theatrically and without. So it seemed to everyone a complete hysteric. Stephen did not understand at all. What normal man could live with her mother? Her feisty temper could only be tolerated because of her amazing outer beauty. Camille in her youth was graceful and well-built. You could paint portraits of her face. A light blush was always colorful on the delicate pink aviator, the girls framing it, delicate blonde curls. Camille's eyes were big and bright blue. Her nose was small and her lovely lips had a beautiful shape and pleasant fullness. Camille was now in her 50s, but she remained an interesting woman. A friend. She always told me that she enjoyed the attention of men. This was the real truth. Indeed, after her father, She had had many suitors who pecked not only at her physical attractiveness, but also at her financial solvency. Stephen was used to having strange men show up at their house and then disappear. He didn't even bother to memorize their names. All these men seemed to him to be just background to his life, and cheap and of poor quality, something small and insignificant, not worthy of attention. None of these living characters could compare to the image of his tragically departed father. His departure happened quite unexpectedly and broke the whole destiny of a 9-year-old boy. One day, Sam went on tour with the circus. They were quite successful. That year, it was a dry, hot summer, and for some unknown reason deep in the night, most of the circus group members died in a fire. The performers had saved money on a hotel, and so they slept in caravans. From one of them, the fire spread to the others, and the hot flames spared no one. Only 2 administrators returned to their hometown, who did not skimp to spend the night in the hotel at their own expense. That was that. One afternoon, Stephen was left alone. Yes, he lived with his mother, but her attitude to her son was rather cool. Therefore, after the death of his father, the boy could not find anywhere that blessed source of unconditional love, which accepts the whole person and forgives him imperfections. Stephen would have liked to remain an open, brave, and kind boy, but circumstances did not allow him. His mother demanded that he stop being a sissy, went all the way, and with others behaved harshly. And all the peers, who subserviently ingratiated to him during his father's lifetime, now became insolent and insolent. They had been taking revenge on Stephen for years for Sam's strength. They laughed, they called him names, they beat him. At first he tolerated it, but then he became embittered and defensive, and showed his classmates his rage all at once. He didn't have to be friends with anyone else, but they stopped touching the boy. There was a big scandal at school when he bit their hands like an animal. He was stigmatized at meetings and councils, but no one wanted to understand the true motives behind the child's behavior. No one ever recognized that he was beating his teeth into the hands that had repeatedly stabbed him. No one ever realized that it was an outburst of humiliated boyish ego. After this incident, Faber Jr. was enlisted in the category of vicious bullies, but he did not make excuses to anyone. It was to his advantage. Finally, his classmates would leave him alone, afraid to avoid him. As always, people bowed their heads to boldness and strength. Stephen liked being alone more and more. He consciously chose silence. The boy rejoiced when classes were over and ran home with pleasure. There he would immerse himself and enjoy the solitude. His mother was always late at work, but even if she came home early, she was rarely interested in her son's affairs. All her questions were superficial, and she never listened to the answers. Camille was fantastically engrossed in her life. In the evenings, she and her girlfriends liked to go to restaurants, have another glass of expensive champagne or dabble in brandy, then spend time with a man and leave for an all-nighter with her beau at a hotel, or bring the Playboy home. Stephen spent all his free time on the computer. All his friends were on the other side of the screen. He loved the confined space of his own home and never went out. Camille had told her son explicitly that she dreamed of him living an independent life. And now, after he had dropped out of training, her hopes of getting rid of her own child soon were dashed. So she decided to lock him up. And Camille methodically sued her son for lack of a job. She strongly disliked his friends and girlfriends, although there weren't many. In the end, she gave him an ultimatum to either go to work for her firm or move out of the house to earn his own bread. Stephen was stuck in the office for over 2 weeks undergoing training. His mother strictly monitored it herself, sorting out his gaps in knowledge, blunders, and mistakes in practice. However, to her surprise, the woman began to notice that her son was rapidly advancing in the profession, had a good sense, and developed analytical skills. She did not wonder where her eyes had been before and why she thought the boy was an Ulyss. The woman was accustomed to extract her own benefit from any situation, so she immediately put her son in a responsible position so that everything would look rank in the eyes of inspecting organizations and in front of employees. Camille bought her son a fake diploma, and he officially started working. If in this son began to suit her completely, now she clung to his personal life, demanded to get a permanent lady of the heart, said that she wanted grandchildren. Stephen wondered to himself why she would do that. She rarely sees her son, and she communicates through the lip. And here are grandchildren. Probably her friends have made their own. She's got nothing to brag about. Stephen introduced her to two girls from the office. He said that he was friends with these young ladies and that they worked for her. Camille met them for a long time, explaining that these pseudo-ladies are not suitable for the role of his girlfriends at all. Stephen began to avoid such conversations, but his mother became more and more insistent every day. The boy was discouraged by her pressure and constantly invented excuses to run away from home. He could not tell his own mother that it was her example that had formed his disdain for women. He looked upon them only as objects for the fulfillment of his intimate needs. Stephen thought they were all mindless dolls. It did not even occur to him that girls could be interesting individuals. The prospect of a marriage relationship in general made him giddy and twitchy. He remembered for the rest of his life how his father suffered, how he wanted to be independent of his wife's whims. But his mother had blackmailed him, using her son's responsible attitude and guilt. The only things Stephen held dear in this world were professions and the personal freedom of a girl he did not cling to by means of charm, intelligence, or modesty. He paid attention only to physical data, evaluated the figure, height, breast size, curves of the body. The guy did not even imagine that such a lady would be with him constantly every minute, irritate him with her rank. He had set a boundary of socializing with women, right from his bed. They were headed out the door. Stephen loved solitude and did not tolerate even his mother's presence around him, and strangers were out of the question. But one had to know Camille to realize she would not stop until she got the desired result. It was not necessary to wait long, because she herself decisively organized a date for her son with the girl she liked. Stephen decided not to contradict his mother in order not to create a conflict situation. He agreed to this play. In the shower, of course. The guy was furious, or his mother's wave of rage. And how was it not to be indignant? This woman had given complete oblivion to his childhood years and now brazenly invaded his private life. She's the right woman for you, Evelyn. Recently moved to our neighborhood, well-to-do parents, but she's so eager to live on her own. I found her a house a few days ago, not far from ours, for rent. I've been in touch with her family. They're our equals. I've known her mother since I was a student. Emily was one of the nicest and most well-mannered girls at the institute. And if Jenna's the name of the girl is anything like her mother, and I'm pretty sure you'll like her. Stephen was nervous about his upcoming meeting with this young lady and resented the match. There's no point in inviting her over. She'll be embarrassed. We'll talk on neutral territory, Camille suggested. It was her mother's decision. Stephen wondered very much how she had managed to let the situation out of her control. He sighed with relief and nodded in agreement. Jenna picked him up. The next evening, Stephen left the house. In a shallow glimpse of rain, he saw a silver open-top Chevy pull into the driveway. The car wasn't new, but it looked solid. A bright brunette with a boyish haircut jumped out. Leather jacket, dry red pants, and a turquoise scarf around her neck. What looked like cowboy boots and bright cherry lipstick. She slammed one hand on the hood. With the other, she dutifully obeyed. No, this girl was not cultured, quiet. Straight back, swift gait, confident look, pretty mouth and round aching chin. A graceful nose. Stephen felt a power emanating from this social lady. She gave him a firm hand and manfully squeezed his fingers in her palm. I suppose you know my name. She turned to Stephen. That's right. You do, he smiled. A sly expression appeared on Jenna's face. Well, I know all about you from Camille. Worthless, weak-willed, in need of constant attention and feminine care. That's how she characterized her own son. Stephen came closer to the girl, put his arms around her waist, and pressed her against him. My mother was so busy with herself that she didn't even notice how her son grew up. became a man without her participation. That's why the picture she has in her head doesn't match reality at all. Yeah, I'm a lone wolf. Yes, I'm a lone wolf. I'm not made for sentiment, but I know how to communicate with women, and you will have the opportunity to make sure of it. Laughing guy in the face of the command. The girl was not embarrassed and did not pull away. She calmly endured direct eye contact with him and even smirked slightly. When Stephen let go of Jenna, she walked around the car, leaned over to the control panel, and performed some simple manipulations. Immediately, the top of the car tilted up. But then let's get away from this house and into the wind, the girl suggested. Stephen opened the doors in front of her and then sat down in the comfortable chair next to her. That's a hell of a car you've got. How long has it been yours? Evelyn's been asking for about a year. My girl's a fire. And she got into a long conversation about battery valves and gasoline prices. What made Stephen realize he was a passionate car enthusiast? I've been having trouble with the open top, keeps coming down at the worst possible times, just like a pain in the ass. The girl continued her monologue. Before breaking down, there is a peculiar sound. I stop the car and strengthen it manually. Behind the conversation, Stephen did not notice how it began to blow his nose, and the sky was covered with steel clouds. It looks like we need to look for a secluded spot. It's getting darker by the minute. It looks like it's going to rain. Stephen turned to the girl. I know a cozy place. Let's go. Evelyn put on the gas. She drove Stephen to a restaurant on the other side of town. A few steps from her house, the parking lot employee grinned into his mustache. As she helped the guy open the door, the car door, it jammed shut. Stephen felt as if the girl was patronizing him. It caused some awkwardness, but at the same time it felt good. Stephen had grown up in a deficit of care and could therefore appreciate its manifestations. He lifted his head up, and at the same moment streams of water rushed down from the sky. The young men ran toward the restaurant. Half darkness reigned there, and a snowy melody poured through the hall. The bartender looked sympathetically at Jenna and Stephen. He gestured with his hand to call them to follow him. In the back room, the guy handed them 2 strong towels, and they wiped their damp heads. The bartender smiled affectionately at the girl. You're adventurous as always. Stephen realized that Jenna and the young man had known each other for a long time. Well, yes, it's me. The girl laughed. All 3 of them returned to the hall. Evelyn approached a vacant table in its depths. Come here, she whispered toward Stephen. He walked toward her, and she pulled him toward the table. There they sat across from each other. Soon a waiter approached the couple, and they placed their order. Or rather, Evelyn made it. She was very attentive to Stephen, and it seemed to him that it was not Camille, but she herself who had taken the initiative to get acquainted. Jenna quickly understood his tastes and predilections. She took a quick look at the menu and decided what he would drink and eat. What she chose, surprising, was her preference in alcohol. In large portions, she devoured Jack Daniels, and Stephen picked up a bottle of collectible red wine. It was immediately obvious that Evelyn was a regular at this establishment, because all of its employees were eager to please her, plowing around like moths. Suddenly, Stephen realized that the society of this girl was very pleasant to him. He did not let himself be broken by his mother, did not succumb to her influence. But Jenna's strength is soft, quite different. She was attentive, showed great interest in the life of the guy, and unobtrusively cared. That's the payoff. Stephen asked her to tell me about herself. I was surprised at how interesting the girl's fate was. She was a little older than him by more than 2 years. She was born into a well-to-do family, but early on she wanted independence, so she started her own business several times. The initial capital was allocated to her by her father, but the first attempts were unsuccessful. He failed. Now I'm doing just fine. She smiled, taking one sip of whiskey after another. It was amazing, but Jenna had become a successful businesswoman. She owned several fashion magazines. This girl was obsessed with everything. She passionately talked to Stephen about the intricacies of her profession. And then, Feeling that her narration bored the interlocutor, told the guy about her hobbies. They were somewhat extreme. Hiking in the mountains, racing on kayaks on raging strong rivers, swimming in forbidden places. Stephen could only wonder that his new acquaintance was not into space travel. At the end of the evening, he was fascinated by the girl. Her determination, courage, and faith in her own strength could be envied by any man. He was afraid to admit to himself that the girl had touched his heart. Jenna was different from many others. She was interesting to be with. Among many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women, she stood out. There was in her some kind of mesmerizing mystery. Next to this girl's soul arose some inexplicable awe. Wanted to drown in a relationship with this reckless representative of the weaker sex. Stephen caught himself at the thought that all his previous romances did not cause him the desire to open up and behave relaxed. They had been smooth, unremarkable encounters with a slight tinge of lust. How many of them had been such arousing his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds. In general, Stephen was driven by a single desire to add to his collection of men. By and large, these were women who were completely alien to him. Jenna, on the other hand, had managed to become his own for the evening. He didn't want to part with her. In all, her appearance distorted such inner confidence that she involuntarily attracted looks from the outside. But that wasn't what attracted a man. I have not seen such beauties. With amazement, he caught himself at the thought that he admired her swift gait, radiant smile, manner of gesticulating. Stephen watched with awe the new feeling that was budding in the depths of his soul. It was an attractive one. The condition was unusual for him. It bathed him in cocktails, excitement, involvement. The guy couldn't understand at all what was clinging to his dictates. It was something inexplicable. He'd only met her today, but he'd immediately accepted all of her as she was. Now it seemed to him that he had known her for years. This was the way she was his own. He felt no shadow of embarrassment or discomfort in her presence. Stephen realized that he was completely relaxed around her. Literally within hours, he realized that this was his woman. Not once did he get bored while talking to her. Not once did he think about business or anyone else. Evelyn, really absorbing all his attention. At the same time, the girl was not intrusive and did not claim adoration or love. Stephen realized that in front of him was a completely independent person, and whatever their relationship in the future, he would not be able to own her completely. Jenna would always have her own world, hidden from everyone else, only at her own will. She will open the doors to it briefly and only to a select few, but will never fully let anyone in, ever. Not because she does not trust, but because it is her way of life, the need to have that very soulful island where you can freely enjoy your own fantasies, dreams, and reflections. Let's date, Stephen suggested. Girls. Seriously, she laughed. Yes, I think we're right for each other. Or maybe I'm wrong, he asked. No, it seems that way. Evelyn looked at him point blank, and then Stephen felt a languid, passionate feeling enveloping him, despite the fire of desire that had enveloped him. He remained outwardly calm and cold. Jenna looked at him with her marvelous velvet brown eyes, and Stephen read understanding in them. The girl silently rose from the table, and he followed her. The rain had stopped outside, and the city was illuminated by the last rays of the setting sun. They raced in her limousine through the empty streets. Then a thick purple twilight descended upon the land. The couple entered a posh house with no one inside. Evelyn led Stephen into her bedroom. The room was in semi-darkness. She turned on only one night light, offered him a shower, and after he heard herself disappear into the bathroom, she came into view. Stephen, about 10 minutes later, and without false fuss, threw off her towels. The boy followed her example. He admiringly looked over her slender young body, then boldly approached her and enclosed the girl in an embrace. Even in intimacy, she did not belong to him completely. He then slipped away, then hot, then cold change of her emotional states, surprised and turned the guy on at the same time. He really wanted to possess her in every way. But even after he had possessed the girl, and was left with the feeling that Jenna did not belong to anyone. Nevertheless, he enjoyed being with her immensely. She knew what men wanted and knew how to enjoy intimacy with them herself. The girl easily gave him her body, but she wouldn't let anyone near her soul. Well, he pondered, so be it, but she's the most amazing woman I've ever met. Yes, I realize there will always be a distance between us. This is a woman who is a loner by nature. And of course, she'll never be my wife. She just won't want to lose her freedom. But I won't force her. Let her be with me only as long as she wants to be with me. She'll leave. It'll hurt, but I'll let her go because I realize Evelyn is a free bird. And no shackles, not even the greatest love or passion, can keep her from flying solo. And now he enjoyed any communication with the beautiful girl, her gaze, not arbitrary body movement, languid sigh, and next to her the whole world remained somewhere behind. Stephen was immersed in that unchanging mystery of being when he and she were alone together. They were united by a strong attraction. Stephen could not regulate his communication with Evelyn. The place and meetings were always chosen by her herself, and he only waited to listen to the roar of the engine of her Cadillac. The guy waited and prepared for every date with her, so the feeling he harbored for the young woman was a pinch of longing. He realized that someday this connection would suddenly cut off, and he would lose forever. She overshadowed all his other women, became that fatal beauty, next to which it was impossible to hook up even one innocent affair. The other ladies lost to her from the beginning because they dissolved in the shadow of her charisma. She was too bright and wonderfully nun-like. Evelyn's relationship was passionate, and at the same time, there was a certain detachment between them from each other. The girl often plunged into her inner world and revealed to the guy only some of her qualities. Therefore, Stephen sometimes felt abandoned and lonely. Sometimes he had no information for weeks about what his beloved was doing, but he bore it stoically. It was ready to tolerate everything for the sake of a couple of dates with her. Anticipation about the end of their relationship constantly tormented the soul of the man, as if he stood on a slippery stone in the middle of the raging elements and was afraid to fall. But the tragedy that occurred in life was more terrible than all his fantasies. It literally tore his soul to shreds. Stephen certainly knew that his woman had other men, and she often spent time with them. But the horrible revelation was that Evelyn was on drugs, and had been for a long time. Throughout their entire relationship, he had never noticed any signs of it. This sad circumstance determined the final chords of their love. Once again, Evelyn disappeared for a long time, and she was found breathless in a city hotel room. The cause of death was a drug overdose. Stephen was running around like a wounded animal. He wasn't ready to let Jenna go, not for good. He hadn't intruded into her world while she was alive, but to lose her irrevocably. No, it was beyond him. This tragedy had transformed Stephen from a young boy into a mature man. He had no friend or family shoulder to lean on during this difficult time. He experienced personal misfortune all alone, and it broke the lad's soul. He was still long stranger to the bottomless gaze. Jenna's velvet voice. Some nights he'd jump out of bed covered in vapors. He thought he could taste the sweet taste of her lips and the exultant scent of her body. In time, Stephen came to terms with it, but a ringing emptiness settled inside him. He began to fill it with alcohol and promiscuous sex. In the moment, when the man got drunk and indulged in flat successes with strangers, it seemed to him that the pain was going away. However, when he woke up in the morning, heavy emotions encompassed his soul in an even tighter ring. Stephen sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of drunkenness and debauchery. In this frenzy, he could not even properly mourn the departure of his mother, did not want to forgive her coldness and indifference, and he could not let her go to the next world with gratitude for his birth and all that she had given him on this sinful earth. The resentment remained in his heart. Stephen was fiercely angry at his mother and his beloved as if they were alive. The only thing that kept him afloat was business worries sobering the young man. As he labored in the office, he felt like a man wallowing in the pain of loss. Stephen realized that he was probably doomed to be alone. To meet someone like Evelyn again was impossible. He had given up hope of personal happiness. To keep from going mad, he was looking for new adventures. And now, with a swaggering, unsteady gait, he was walking through the city. Soft light poured in from the windows of the houses, and appetizing smells wafted through the windows. Somewhere a television was on, somewhere music was playing. It seemed to the man that there in the walls of these houses all people were happy, and someone needed them. He was in a hurry to get rid of this feeling and to leave the territory, where smelled cozy and happiness. Not because he was jealous, but because he was getting worse there. The man's hair fluttered in the wind, and he kept walking, unable to see the road. Out of the lilac haze of fog, a woman's silhouette appeared right in front of him, and he boldly went to get acquainted. The lady was beautiful and uninhibited. He stood in front of her and put his hand on her shoulder. The stranger did not even flinch, and Stephen felt better, for he felt the warmth of a human body. There was a gaping emptiness and an animalistic glint in the woman's eyes. He understood her without words, took her under his arm, and together they moved forward. At the inn, the night guest treated Stephen without resistance or objection. She gave herself to him. At 12 o'clock, he woke up in bed and found a luscious, hungover blonde beside him. His head split open, but he needed to get to the office, as he silently started to pack. The girl's face reflected bewilderment. "Were you paid to stay until 2? Let's stay together. We spent such a beautiful night." Stephen nodded silently. Overcoming the growing disgust in his soul was a mixture of guilt and squeamishness. He had experienced it when saying goodbye to random ladies. This condition was repeated every time. Stephen carefully concealed this attitude from his partners, but could do nothing about his own feelings. "I'm gonna shower and go to work. Will you leave a phone number?" the blonde asked. "Text me yours. I'll call you back." It was a phrase Stephen said to every woman he spent the night with, but he never called any of them back. Under the cool lines of the water, he came to his senses, but the munchies from last night were slowly wearing off. Feeling the degrees still playing in his body, Stephen decided to walk to the office. It was not far. He easily covered the distance of 1 block, but the day was heating up, and the hot August sun glared down on the young man. Stephen unbuttoned his shirt collar and walked over to the fountain. He realized that it would look rather strange. A successful businessman washing his face right in this urban facility. But right now he didn't care. Stephen walked over to one of the pounding water features and put his head under it, the illuminating currents doing their thing. He was immediately relieved and moved forward. In the public garden where the fountain was playing, not far away on a bench sat a girl. Passing by her, Stephen heard quiet sobs. Involuntarily, he turned around. The stranger was very thin and pale. Not a gram of makeup. Thin fingers of hands nervously passing pens. Textile bags full of tears. Big blue eyes. Stephen sat down next to her. "So, what are we giving here?" With a sneer, he asked. The girl flinched. The young man expected her to rudely answer him to jump up from the bench and run away. However, she turned to him and often clapped her eyes. "You know, I am grateful to you for asking me what I am crying about. No one has asked me that for a long time. No one I know cares. They're all in a hurry. I think they're running away from their own and other people's problems. They don't want to empathize with their neighbors. It's like it's none of their business. It is easier to pass by than to get into the problem or help trustingly." The stranger shared with him. "Someone will say that you should leave your worries at home. But I have almost no close people. There is no one to ease my soul. One grandmother. She won't say no, she'll listen. But there are things I can't tell her. I'm afraid of disturbing her." Stephen looked at the girl with surprise and was amazed that she was so hasty in opening her soul to a stranger. He noticed that the stranger was very modestly dressed and realized her income was very modest. He did not feel sorry for the girl, but the situation was curious. Therefore, Stephen did not interrupt her, but listened attentively. "You know, I went around all the offices in search of a job, and everywhere rejected. No experience. And my grandmother's pension is not even enough for food. She's a sick person, even though she's keeping up. But she's a sick person. A lot of money is spent on medicines, and utilities have to be paid. But I can't help her at all. She raised me. She gave everything, lived for me. And I don't get a chance to thank her. I can't get a job. That's all. I have no strength left. I just sit and cry. She cried deeply again. Stephen looked at her more closely and thought that he had never made such an unusual acquaintance before. "And what is your education?" he asked philologically. "I just went to school to get a job. There's a gymnasium across the square, and a teacher was needed." Stephen scratched the back of his head, and an absolutely wild idea occurred to him, and he voiced it. "I need a secretary here. Oh, take me. I know the computer." The girl exclaimed hopefully. "Well, you're in luck. I am the owner of a respectable brokerage firm, and I can help. I think you are literate in this regard." "Yes, I have a red diploma." The girl rummaged through her bag and showed it to Stephen. He pretended to scrutinize it. "Well, I'll hire you if you want to," and the girl's eyes flashed genuine interest. "Really? Why? Am I really going to deceive inexperienced ladies?" At these words, the stranger blushed thickly. "I'm very grateful to you. You're just saving me." Her eyes are more important again. "But don't feel bad, Wendy." She stared at Stephen in surprise. "How do you know my name?" "From my diploma, actually. I showed it to her." "Oh yes," the girl smiled trustingly. "But I have one condition," the man continued. "Oh, anything you want," the girl promised. And Stephen decided to make an experiment, to create a tempting situation for this young girl to see how she would react. He stood up and examined her from head to toe. And his type, of course. However, the girl's looks were pleasant, and the more he interacted with her, the more attractive he found her. Wendy had a lovely doll face with bottomless eyes, a dainty nose and pretty lips. She had stopped crying, and a delicate blush and charming round dimples appeared on her girlish cheeks. Stephen scratched the back of his head, then began to adjust the belt on his pants. "Well, anyway, you're going to have to do me an intimate favor." "Well, right there in the office on your first day of work." After these words, Wendy often blinked her eyes. Her eyebrows rose up in surprise. "That's a must. But somehow I wanted to pay for everything in this life." "How did you put it?" "You don't have the money, so we'll take someone else's." Wendy was completely confused and insulted, jumped up from the bench, but then pulled herself together and boldly looked Stephen in the face. "Give me the address, please. I'll come to apply for a job. I'll be there. It won't cost me anything. We'll be able to provide for my grandmother and me." "That's right," he said. "Your salary will be good." Stephen gave the address of the office and said goodbye to the girl. He was sure she would change her mind, wouldn't come to work tomorrow. Some fleeting, joyful feeling, like sunlight slipping among the clouds, lighted up the man's heart, but it immediately disappeared into the depths of his dark thoughts. Looking at the man's receding figure, Wendy felt uneasy. How to go to him tomorrow? And why give herself to a stranger? She had no choice. The strength taken from years of hardship was running out. She and her grandmother needed a piece of bread. So Wendy had no qualms about the ordeal ahead of her. Of course, it was unpleasant. After all, she had never had a man before. But life had left her no choice. She couldn't sit on her grandmother's neck all the time. Wendy remembered her unhappy childhood. She'd once had a full family, a mother and father, and even a philosopher grandfather. A picture of him teaching her to read from a children's primer came to mind, on the porch of the village house. And then came this misfortune. Her parents had traveled with her to her grandmother's house, and there had been a gas leak. Only Vanessa and Wendy survived, thanks to the fact that they were sleeping in the far bedroom, window open. But despite this, they were also taken away from there by ambulance in serious condition. The doctors managed to pump the victims out, and then, And then began a difficult litigation with the guardianship. Wendy wanted to take away from her grandmother because of her low income and advanced age. But the spirited woman fought to the end and won her granddaughter back. She realized that she could not give her a wide range of opportunities in life, but she could surround the little girl with warmth and love. And the woman did everything possible and even impossible to raise her granddaughter. Yeah, they didn't have much. Sometimes they even had to borrow food from a neighbor before the guardianship came. They both looked at them, drooling, but they couldn't touch them. And after the patronage of the social services, they took everything back. But they didn't want to part. Native people who loved each other, no one else could give them such happiness. And so, overcoming all adversity, they stayed together. Through ill health, Vanessa was engaged in lessons with her granddaughter. This made her a very good student. This allowed Wendy to enter on a budget. She remembered how she and her grandmother celebrated the occasion, with homemade wine from grapes that grew on their plot and fragrant strawberries from their own vegetable garden. It was small, but kept in perfect order. You bet, because they had been feeding from it for a whole year. They managed to grow potatoes, beets, onions, dried apples from the forest for the winter. However, they had enough cherry jam to stock up on. Is 2 women too much to ask? Of course, Wendy wanted to have beautiful clothes and in childhood toys. But from a very early age, she realized that there was something more important than things. She treasured that warm and affectionate relationship with her grandmother, and she thanked God that she wasn't taken from her somewhere. Wendy was used to labor and discipline from childhood. Her grandmother's upbringing helped her to keep the best human qualities in her and always be herself. The girl knew that she was very strong, but now her soul was broken. Not every young shoulders could withstand the hardships she went through. However, the girl did not cry anymore, wiped the tears from her eyes, and decided that she would definitely go tomorrow to the office at the named address and do everything this paper man asked her to do. And then she would work faithfully. Wendy went to her home. She was in a state of confusion. The joy of finding a job had been covered up by a lewd offer from her future boss. The rest of the day flew by. To forget a little and shake off the unpleasant feelings, Wendy did all the chores around the house, whatever she could get her hands on. By evening, she was tired. I decided to call Grandma for tea. Anticipating the pleasure, she cut in half a loaf and abundantly smeared it with apple jam. Although here she put the impressively sized sandwich in front of her grandmother. Well, Grandma, do you want a hearty meal? Oh, that's what I mean. To live a life of pleasure, laughed Vanessa. Yeah, agreed Wendy. Now I'm going to shower, and I'll get in touch, and we'll go for a promenade before bed. The sun was sloping towards sunset when she and her grandmother went for a walk. They decided to walk all the way to the quarry. Not the nearest light, but pleasantly, reasoned Wendy. The rest of the day flew by. Wendy and Grandma loved these summer evenings. Easy for both of them. Walking along the forest road beneath tall pines, the quarry appeared in the distance, but already you could make out its dark Moldovan water. The crowns of the young spruce trees that had been planted near it a few years ago. Soon they approached it and started throwing small pebbles into the water from the shore. Imperceptibly, the lilac twilight thickened over them, and the travelers hurried home. They did not want to walk through the forest in the dark, but on the narrow forest road they met a very ancient old Bradshaw woman with a stick in her hand. "Would you say, sweetheart?" she asked. "There's a high voltage far out here." "We haven't heard of one," replied Wendy. As she got closer, the girl was able to make out the passersby. She was about 80 years old, no less. "Oh my God, I've been reading too much. I think I'm lost. Where does this road lead to?" "To the city." "Where do you want to go?" Vanessa asked. "Oh, then I'm going the wrong way." The old woman fussed, turning back. Wendy looked up at the sky. It was only a little over half an hour before it was completely dark. "Wait, where are you going?" "There's no high voltage that way either. This road goes all the way to the quarry and ends there." "Where did you come from?" "From a cottage farm. from the forest. So I have a cottage there, and the live one is now in mine. So you're coming from there now with the forest. Vanessa mentally estimated the trajectory loomed decent kilometers. She marveled at the antics, but you won't make it back in the light. The forest is big, and in some places heavily overbolten. Only this road is rented by hunters, but it breaks off near the forest. People have often been confused in this area. They've even found human remains of travelers who lost their way in the forest and couldn't find their way out. Look, it'll be dark soon. You won't find your way back in the dark. It'll only get more confusing. Come with us, and in the morning you'll take the train to your place. It leaves around 800. The woman recovered a little, but then she agreed. On the way she said that she went to the forest from early morning and imperceptibly passing from mushrooms from berries deepened into the thicket for about 7 kilometers. And that's if you count in a straight line. One could only wonder at her vigor and physical endurance. At her age, I'm from the city myself, my grandmother said. My father used to live there, but we moved away a long time ago. I was a girl. My mother died early, right after giving birth. My father was 6 years old when he got married. Then he married a woman, and we went to live with her. She made an excellent stepmother. Not everyone can find such a mother. She was so nice. She's dead now, of course. God rest her soul. And my father's in the other world, and my husband has recently left. But I'm still living. 3 kids. God sent them. Good, caring ones. But they've gone to different cities. Such frankness of a random travel companion surprised Wendy, and she, herself, not understanding why, suddenly revealed to her companion all today's story that had happened to her in the park. Vanessa looked at her surprised, but did not utter a word of reproach. I'll tell it all out loud. The girl breathed a sigh of relief and felt as if a huge stone had fallen off her soul, interfering with her life further, spilling everything to a stranger. And she listened, nodding and mumbling to herself. During the conversation, they did not notice how they approached the town. At home, they took the grandmother as their own. And in the daylight, she did not seem so ancient. The women offered her shelter, a warm bed and hot tea with a loaf generously smeared with jam. The rays of light and the old woman's eyes were full of gratitude. After tea, she lay down and fell fast asleep. And on the morning before work, Wendy accompanied her to the electric train, comfortably settled in the carriage. Smiling grandmother in the open window waved goodbye to the girl, wrinkles in hand. Thank you, honey, that you did not abandon on the road. It's no big deal. You don't go into the woods alone anymore, do you? It's scary. You might not get any help. Thank you. I won't. I've had enough of walking. She smiled and suddenly added, and you, daughter, don't think that nothing just happens in the world. Go get a job. And that guy, don't be afraid. You'll do as he asked. Unexpected happiness will come into your life. Take my word for it. The train rumbled and moved off. At a loss, Wendy followed it. She forever remembered the kind, old woman's face and her shrewd, tenacious gaze. With 3 novelties, Wendy went to the broker's office. And what was Stephen's surprise when he saw yesterday's acquaintance outside his office? And she'd arrived before the office opened. Charming what? He thought. What am I going to do with her in terms of intimacy? And why would I want her? It's silly. Well, a young girl like that will be a wonder to me. Oh, hello, young one. He turned to Wendy. Honestly, I thought you weren't coming. You would have shown up sooner, though. Well done. But let's see how you do after you've checked in with HR, shall we? Let's go. He took her under his arm and led her into the office. Stephen felt her stiffen up, all wooden. Yeah, relax, he said. I'm not touching. Let's get organized. And by lunchtime, you'll be in my office, she explained. The girl raised her trusting eyes to him and nodded silently. Stephen noticed this time what beautiful, delicately furniture-colored hair she had had when they first met. It had been gathered into a ponytail, and now it fell loosely over her shoulders. It caused him to feel pleasantly under a cloud of sexual fantasy. Stephen walked into his office and immersed himself in his work. In contrast to his frivolous attitude towards the female sex, he went about his work in a collected and businesslike manner. He only broke away from it when Wendy timidly poked her pretty head in the doorway. Frankly, he had already forgotten about the girl. "May I come in?" she asked. "Oh, in time," he laughed. "I really am. I really want to, since you came, and we have a contract. Let's do everything quickly and disperse. You're already registered in the personnel department. Formalized." The girl answered fearfully. Stephen got up from his seat, walked to the door, and turned the key in the lock. "Well, hurry up and show me what you can do." Wendy began to slowly undress. "What's this?" Stephen's eyes rounded, and he stared in bewilderment at the knit pantaloons, small blue florals. "Lingerie," the girl answered bewilderedly. "From what grandmother's trunk did you get them?" The man just rolled with laughter. "No, my dear, they are not lingerie," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "It's some kind of priority cling." He wrinkled his nose. "Look, go to work sometime. That's a very exotic outfit you're wearing." I wanted something. He couldn't help himself and laughed. "I feel like I've undressed my grandmother. Go. I'm unilaterally terminating our contract. You're making me cry. Go ahead and don't take offense." But I'm really not mean. He often wanted to show off his sexual exploits to his buddies, but the pantaloon story suddenly became personal and untouchable. It was funny, but he didn't want to reveal it to any third party. Stephen caught himself smiling blissfully as he stared into space. "Good thing I have a separate office," he thought, and got to work. Wendy slipped out of his business suite and froze by the door. Complete confusion reigned in her soul. The girl didn't know what she should do. To be upset because she had caused Homeric laughter at the chief, or to rejoice that he had lost his desire for Polonsky like a tomato. She returned to her seat and tried to concentrate on her work. The next day, Stephen came through the reception area. He said hello to his regular secretary. Nancy was a beautiful lady with a mind-blowing figure, large breasts and round hips, hers colored in various light shades. Her hair was gathered on her head in such a ponytail. Her makeup was bright and professional. She sat by the computer simply, nodding her perfectly painted guesses at the keyboard. He glanced toward Wendy. She, too, was at her workstation. Meeting the chief's gaze, she all folded up and literally squirmed in her office chair. Stephen felt as if the fragile girl was about to disappear into space. "Hello," he said casually. "You could say congratulations on your first day of work. Yesterday was a baptism of fire." He smirked meaningfully, and the girl blushed. "I will." What questions he had for Nancy. She's in the business. "Nancy," he turned to the secretary. "You distributing the duties so that it's easier for her for now. What about you is more complicated. You understand, while she gets up to speed." Of course, Stephen performed everything to the best of his ability. "She's a girl. She's got a high typing speed. I checked it out. We have a lot of turnover. I'll just give it to her now, and I'll take care of the urgent stuff." "Nancy, what a clever girl you are," Stephen said with admiration. A satisfied smile stretched across the blonde's face, and Stephen entered his office and immediately forgot about both ladies. He was so absorbed in his work that he often didn't hear what was going on around him. When the man left the office in the evening, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "This is for you." Stephen pulled out of the bag several packages of expensive French underwear. "That these are normal underpants?" He grinned. The girl blushed thickly. "You what?" "I don't need anything." "Yes, you do. I saw it with my own eyes." "And what you have? Burn it. In fact, you know what? I'll give you a bonus. You go to closet, change your hair. You know, all that feminine stuff. And that's a must, of course. Otherwise, I'll fire you for sure." "Well convinced," she agreed. While Stephen went down to the exit of the building, on his face waited a mysterious smile. But it happened to buy underpants for the secretary, not for his mistress, not for his wife, but just from the street. He shrugged his shoulders, but noted to himself that he was in an elevated mood. A week later, Nancy literally burst in on him with a perplexed look. She turned to the chief. "Stephen, but what a good girl. Indeed, her help is invaluable. But I can't get her to dress differently. It's such junk that our partners are horrified when they look in the waiting room." Stephen took his head off the papers, and it hit him. The girl had absolutely no money, and he'd forgotten what he'd said about the bonus. "Nancy, I'll take care of this matter myself. Go to your office," he commanded. When the man left his office, it was already dark outside the window. It was the 11th hour of the night, and Wendy was still sitting at her desk in the same pose. "What are you doing here so late?" he wondered. "Yes, I wasted a lot of time while I was sorting it out, and the documentation needs to be done for tomorrow. So I stayed late," quietly whispered the girl. "And you diligently grinned, Stephen. It's a pity only in the business sphere, in others not so much." He gave her a sly look. Wendy stood up from the table and mumbled embarrassedly, "Well, I finished. Permission to go?" "I'm not." Stephen said with ostentatious distinction that it was getting late, and such valuable employees I prefer to drive personally. "So please, mademoiselle, gentlemen, welcome to my private car." He theatrically gave the girl his hand, and she trustingly accepted it. Together they went downstairs. He opened the car door for her, and she settled into the front seat. The engine roared to life, and the crossover sped off. Wendy gave a startled gasp. "Oh, come on, Stephen. We're in town, not on the highway. You're telling me off. Tell me, please, what's the right one? Just a few days in the office, and I'm on the short end of the stick with the brass." And he laughed. "But since you're so brave, I'm sure you'll take my remark adequately." "Oh, and how to her remarks?" The girl got worried. Of course. Speak up. I'll fix everything." "Well, it is not on the documents. Do not worry," he calmed the girl. "It's on your appearance. You see how stylish Nancy is. You, too, need to tidy up your closet to match your business status. But we've safely replaced some of the old stuff. At least I hope so." Stephen glanced meaningfully at Wendy, and she lowered her eyes. "Come on, you're embarrassed in front of the chief, with whom you were one step away from an intimate moment." Remembering the situation, the man was in a playful mood. "So I haven't gotten Stephen's first paycheck yet to buy the clothes I need," justified Wendy. "But I can't wait for you to get it. It's in the accounting department, and I can't give it to you sooner. Why don't you and I stop by the convenience store and pick out something for tomorrow anyway?" Nancy's been buzzing around. "It's a distraction from work." "But why would you want to spend so much money?" asked the girl. Wendy exhaled tiredly. "Stephen, but let's go in private. Call me Stephen. That's one. And two is let me decide for myself, unnecessary or not unnecessary. Not for me. Why don't you cut the crap and wear it normally? And then we'll decide about this money, all right?" Wendy nodded in agreement. Stephen led the girl to a boutique with very expensive clothes to her questioning and indignant look. He had already prepared the necessary arguments. "I run an expensive firm and my secretaries have to be dressed up. Accordingly, you may not blink your lovely eyes. I don't accept any objections. Girl," he called the sales girl, "would you be kind enough to match my girl's strict office bow?" He glanced contentedly at the remote Baroque lady, then took a seat on the plush sofa and began leisurely digging through his phone messages. When Wendy came out of the prime, paid again, and business attire, he gave a contented thumbs up and calmly said, "Well, that's what I wanted. Just perfect. Now you look appropriate to your status. Thank you." He turned to the girl serving them. Then he paid for his purchases and drove Wendy home. She got out of the car with a happy smile and thanked him for the purchases. "Well, let's go, it's getting late, and there's a lot of work tomorrow. I did it not only for you, but also for me. Good night." He drove off, flashing his headlights for her. After driving a few meters away, Stephen stopped the car and wondered inwardly. In him woke up such a mischievous boy, who seemed to sleep for many years. The man realized that he liked these feelings very much, and they were directly related to Wendy. Communicating with her gave him great pleasure. And today, he could hardly hide his admiration when she came out of the premiere. Totally refreshed, he could not show his admiration for her, for he himself had not yet realized what a pleasant and joyous state of mind was entering his life. To Stephen, this feeling was absolutely new. The memory of greatness was still alive in his heart, but it was somewhat detached. And often that coldness gave them away from each other. Love for her had not warmed his heart, nor had it evoked such intoxicating warmth and joy as was now developing in the man's soul. These soft currents of magical feelings were rolling over his whole being. He wondered to himself where it came from in him and why it felt so good now. What was this miracle that had happened in his destiny? After all, Stephen could not even suppose that this young girl would catch his eye. The man even felt a slight pang of jealousy because he imagined what a dazzling impression Wendy would make tomorrow morning, and many men would throw interested glances at her. The next morning, he found Wendy alone in the waiting room. "You look marvelous, transformed. I can't tell a story, I can't describe it. Just a different woman, I must say. Beautiful." As he opened the door to his office, he stopped and made a gesture. A thumbs up. "And this one, don't even doubt in the slightest that your fabulously good pantaloons burned." He winked at her. "Burned," the girl smiled. He sat down at his desk and couldn't gather his thoughts. Wendy, the image of her and the girl had followed him like an obsession. Some kind of illumination had settled in his soul, boyish moods and resentments of the past. The sorrows and tragedies receded into the background. She was so bright, cheerful, and sincere that next to her did not want to play the role of macho. And most importantly, Stephen realized that with her he was real, without social husks, and such a man liked himself more. And that in general he liked to enjoy life and be happy. He suddenly wanted to embrace this thin and defenseless girl, tenderly kiss her on the cheek and shield her from all the misfortunes of this world. Her purity evoked in his soul. Her purity evoked in Stephen's soul an extraordinary delight and faith in the best. If fate had sent him such a tender and unsophisticated devoted girl, it meant that she had given him a chance to free himself from the shell and enjoy the strong moments of life. He was delighted with this new joyous and pure feeling. But I was afraid at the same time. He started acting like a boy. In the office he was stern and severe with Wendy, and in the evenings he'd stand guard outside her house and watch her from the window of his car. He laughed at himself for turning into a young bully. With his money and status in life, Stephen realized that he was acting like an idiot. Just a short time ago, he had been a risky chucklehead and teased Wendy every day. Now it seemed from the outside that he was avoiding her. But for now, he couldn't help his inner shyness. He was also kind of embarrassed to show his feelings in front of the secretary and the blonde. After all, she had unwittingly witnessed their relationship. In such a suspended state, Stephen stayed for about 2 months, until Nancy brought him out into the open. Stephen once turned to her when she was bringing important papers for him to sign. "You're breaking yourself all the time. Is your attitude towards the new girl on your face? Is it readable by your behavior?" The blonde smiled slyly, which is clearly visible to everyone. Scared Stephen. "Well, not all of it. I could see the spark between a man and a woman right away. It's already a flame between you two. The man between us is dumbfounded." "You mean her?" "Stephen, you're such a tough cookie. And now you're just smeared. But get your act together and eventually ask her out on a real date. Without all the poking and prodding. You think the man scratched the tip of his nose. Of course, to an outsider, the situation is obvious. You like each other, and it's time for you to be together." Nancy's words made Stephen's heart warm. He thought that after his idiotic proposal in the park, Wendy was not serious about him, and certainly not considering him as a suitor. But the blonde was so encouraging to his boss that he decided to talk to Wendy alone that very evening. "Look, I want to spend some time with you." Right off the bat, he started at the end of the day. "Yeah, Stephen, I'm ready." And Wendy had to pack a notebook and a tape recorder in her bag. "You don't get it. I want a personal relationship with you." "Oh, I'm not your equal." "Equal or not, thank God, it's up to me." "Let's give it a shot of hope." Stephen turned to her. "What would it take?" "I'm inexperienced," embarrassed the girl. "Come on. You don't know. Your task is simple: to be yourself." Stephen smiled. "But also to go out with me. What do you say?" "I don't know what will come of it, but it will be a curious experiment. Let's assume that we have a tentative agreement. And what will be our first date?" the girl asked. "I'll think about it," Stephen promised. He understood perfectly well that the standard scheme of seduction in the case of Wendy will not work. One could, of course, force her to sleep with him by blackmail. But that seemed disgusting to him now. The man sincerely wanted to like the girl for real. Days passed in his thoughts, and he noted to himself that his activity was not as vigorous as usual. Stephen was distracted all the time by thoughts of the girl. At the end of the week, he peeked into the reception area. Without his permission. Nancy, sneaking out early, but he was glad she'd shown wits and some sass. Now he and Wendy could not be interrupted by anyone. Stephen walked over to the girl and stared at her for somewhat longer than usual. Wendy jumped up from her chair. "Stephen, I'm not staying late today. I'm leaving. Just tidying up my desk." "Yeah, I can see that. Good for you. You're getting the hang of it. Except I asked you to call me Stephen when we're alone." "No, I'm gonna go by my first name in the office. What do you want to do?" "I was going to suggest something." Stephen's a little hesitant. "I'd like you to accompany me on a walk. It's the weekend. We could spend it outdoors. I've been wanting to go to a walking park for a long time. They say it's very cool, all Russian-style bogaters. So I want to invite you to come with me." "I'd love to, but I promised my grandmother I'd go with her. We haven't been anywhere in a long time. I wanted to buy theater tickets. I've been thinking about it." "You know what? Why don't you invite her to come with us? I think a woman would be interested too. It's not a long ride in comfort." "Oh, that would be convenient for you, Wendy. If they call me, it's convenient. I'll give you a day to think about it tonight, and I want you to call me tomorrow. I hope it's a favorable decision." Wendy called her grandmother with her, and Vanessa gladly agreed. "Oh, this is so exciting," she told her granddaughter. "After all, it's been a long time since I've been anywhere, much less traveled. Yes, it is curious to see your boss, Stephen, what he is like outside of professional communication. You know, Grandma, I can't understand him. Sometimes he's simple and kind, and sometimes he's weirdly avoidant. He pretends not to notice me at all. Well, trust me, in my experience. Wendy, are you deeply sympathetic to this gentleman? Come on, he's so rich, he has so many beauties at his disposal." "Yes, my dear, affairs of the heart. They're not even capitalistic. Rich, not rich. Successful, not successful. That principle doesn't work here. You're young. Forgive me, granddaughter. And you don't have much wisdom. But I'll give you an example. He's the neighbor downstairs. You can't take your eyes off him. A handsome man. I saw women running after him before my eyes. They were ready to tie the shoelaces on his sneakers. A girl. A little redhead, still puny, but just classy. But he's talkative, and he loves her, who doesn't look at the pretties. She's the only one he's ever wanted. So it's okay. They're good parents in their family. They cured 3 of them. It would seem that they're completely different people, and even after they cheat on each other, they stick together. I had a friend who was like that. Here's her story. When she was young, handsome Kim got tuberculosis. So one day he comes home with a voucher for recuperative treatment. And the next day a woman with charm, like a sin, meets the chief accountant with his work and starts thanking her for taking such care of her husband. Say, "Thank you for the allotted voucher." The woman's eyes in a pile, like a duck, a voucher. Never had one. Valka sprints home, and goes into her husband's pocket, and there's a treacherous bag of anger next to the voucher. Say, "I'm waiting for you, my dear, my beloved, in such and such a room with a NATO reception." Treatment of sexual recuperation. Gathering all his scorned honor in a fist, rushed mother-in-law in that sanatorium entered the room, waiting to separate from breakfast, and on the bed sees knitting, scarf, shawl under it. And there's a teddy bear from her mistress. Our Valia read outright. What love? What love? She sits, grieving, rubbing the umbrella in her hands. That's when the villain comes out. He meets his mistress, and he kicks his lawful wife in the legs. Forgive me, I'm not to blame. He came himself, woman ball, but proud stepped over the prostrate body, not forgetting a couple of times to kick the rival on the head of the husband unfaithful, kicked her out on arrival, and then took her mother's advice to take her back. Who would want such a trained lady? And with 2 kids. Kim never got tuberculosis again, and there are plenty of such examples, my dear. And there are successful women and beautiful as dolls from head to toe, well-groomed, and at work honor and a tight purse. But there is no female happiness. Lonely. And for a woman it's right. She will not rest until she realizes herself as a wife and mother. That's our nature, so don't look at his wealth, and don't get scared. Act natural. Maybe he is tired of these capricious and rich kings and pulled the man to something real. You're guileless, and you're straight and beautiful. I'm the one with the granddaughter. You don't even need makeup. Everything about you is tender, soft, and feminine. Oh, thank you, Grandma, for your kind words. I believe you. I guess it's all true. How many heart-to-heart talks have we had with you? You've never been wrong once. Always right. It's not just intuition, it's logic. I'll tell you the signs, and you apply them to the chief, and you'll know his intentions. Many young ladies often wonder about the attitude of their chosen one, whether he is keen and loves sincerely and deeply. If such questions disturb your soul, you need to analyze the actions of your partner. There are several aspects of a man's behavior by which you can judge his feelings. He notices the merits and often talks about them. He is really sincerely attached to a woman if he evaluates her comprehensively, admires the appearance, character, abilities, achievements of his chosen one. He notices not only beautiful legs, but also a sharp mind, kind disposition, a subtle sense of humor, the ability to support in critical moments. Often admires a woman. He looks at a special, not oily, full of passion eyes, but warmly and with tenderness. Many men like to look at their favorites, furtively enjoying their beauty and grace from afar or while sleeping. But close eye contact does not strain them. They do not hide their gaze and do not look away. Sensitive to change. He always pays attention to a new hairstyle or outfit beloved. Subtly feels the changes in her mood and behavior. Generous on compliments and on praise. She positively evaluates the desire for development in the profession. Well, or culinary experiments in the home kitchen. He wants to be close. He lets the chosen one into his space, offers to meet on his territory, gladly shows his home, office, dacha, strives to spend with his beloved as much time as possible. He is comfortable in her society in a busy work schedule. A man like this will always find time. He will call or write a message. And if men prefer to meet in hotels or in the apartment, the partner comes up with a lot of excuses about communicating at home. Rarely calls and writes, so he is not in a hurry to let her into his life. He has to be patient. He's willing to wait for his lady. That goes for everything. Does the girl dress up for a date? Is she late for a meeting or pulling for intimacy? If a man is reverent about the chosen one, he does not rush her with important decisions. When a woman really hooked him, he will be patient and show patience, whether she is capriciously uncollected or not in the mood. Wants to be liked. He makes an effort to look good, pays maximum attention to his hair and clothes, chooses perfume carefully, wants to become closer in the spiritual sphere, so he is actively interested in the worldview, hobbies, friendship of the chosen one. When meeting, he shows gallantly, demonstrates his best qualities. He also values her opinion. If the partner plans a long-term relationship with his chosen one, he listens to her advice when choosing clothes and food. He discusses with his beloved creative projects and perspective plans, allows you to evaluate his actions, performances of movement. In a positive way, he perceives critical comments, and if he considers them fair, he avoids blunders in the future. He also shortens the distance. It is pleasant for him to be in the same space with his chosen one. Therefore, he will not build the boundaries of communication with her, and the desire to be closer is well traced at a random meeting. A loving man opens his arms wide. He smiles and begins to move towards her, not hiding his joy. But if he crosses his arms on his chest, scratches the back of his head, and his smile looks strained, the presence of a lady is not part of his plans. With his entire appearance, he will make it clear that meetings are better planned and limited in time. He demonstrates his achievements. He gladly shows his beloved all the merits of his life. A special disposition and trust are indicated by those cases when a man offers his lady to use his phone, tablet, put on his shirt, try on sunglasses, sit behind the wheel of his favorite car. He spares his beloved's feelings, twiddling his thumbs. He tries to avoid conflicts or situations that upset the chosen one, will not play on her weaknesses and pain points. The first to initiate reconciliation at a rift will stop a protracted dispute. He is sensitive to the tears of his beloved, so he will always embrace her, will calm her down. He will not allow strangers to hurt the feelings of his partner. You know he is ready to change his lifestyle. Here, if a man is interested in a woman, he will roll mountains for her. He will replay plans, take an extraordinary vacation. If necessary, he'll come in the middle of the night. And if there are no feelings, he will come up with 1,000 obstacles to deny her a date or help. The partner of the one has full information about the interests, hobbies, and tastes of the woman he loves. He knows what books she reads, what wine she drinks, what genres of movies she prefers, her favorite flowers and perfume. Without serious intentions, a man's interests are limited to the framework of sexual relations. He easily forgets about things that are meaningful to her. He is sincere and frank. A successful man wants to see in his chosen one not only a beloved, but also a friend. He will trust her with his innermost thoughts and dreams. He will willingly tell about childhood offenses, favorite hobbies, relationships with parents, friends, colleagues. He is honest with the chosen one. If the truth can hurt her, he would rather keep silent than deliberately lie. Includes in the plans for the future. In conversation, a man begins to operate often with the pronoun we. He no longer speaks of himself in the singular person. Now it sounds more often we will decide, we will see, we will think, we will come. So he subconsciously demonstrates readiness for a joint life with the chosen one. By the way, he is attentive in intimate relationships and intimacy. He tries not only to satisfy himself, but also to reveal the possibilities to his partner. First of all, to make it pleasant for her. After the end of intimacy, he does not withdraw at all, but maintains bodily contact. He is open to hugs and touches. He is ready to change for the sake of his beloved. And if a woman is dear to a man, he can give up the most bad habits and will control himself. In order to please her, he will share her hobbies. He will tolerate her friends and relatives, even if he does not like them. He shows care. Serious attitude to a woman is manifested by a desire to help her, that is, to be useful to her. The man is responsive to her requests and zealously takes up the solution of any, sometimes insignificant problem situations. Sacrifice personal time and professional interests. You know he doesn't tolerate competition. He wants to be the only one in his beloved's life. Becomes irritated at the sight of potential rivals. He can't stand comparisons with other men. He is satisfied if he manages to make a good impression on the chosen one and is the first to give her support. He likes it when a woman consults him when making important decisions. She values his point of view. Next, he takes care of the expenses. A man is not in a hurry to pay for a partner who does not interest him, but for his beloved, he will not spare anything. He is constantly invested in her beauty and health, pays for the election in restaurant stores, provides her with a decent life. This is very important for him. Be a leader in the material sphere. Show willingness to take on any financial obligations of the beloved. He is not afraid of responsibility. He willingly tries on the role of the head of the family, is ready to make important decisions and implement them, voices a desire to marry, become a father, takes care of his loved ones, introduces his parents and relatives. When a man decides to take this step, a woman can be sure that his intentions are the most serious. She is the only contender for his heart. He will gladly get acquainted, and with her relatives will try to make a pleasant impression on them. He is eager to take the relationship to the next level. A man interested in a short sexual encounter. He constantly comes up with some ridiculous excuses, preventing the reunion. And if his intentions are serious, he moves the relationship along. After meeting his parents, he offers to come over, and then he proposes. Vanessa finished and looked intently at her granddaughter. "How much is similar?" she remarked with surprise. "That's what I told you. So let's go, since we're invited. Besides, I can see you like him too. I don't understand him, but I can see he's got a good heart." "All right. Well, let's see the boss outside the office." The young woman laughed wickedly. The trip was indeed a pleasant surprise for them. On the road, Stephen made a lot of jokes. He was alert. Wendy liked the fact that he did not ignore her grandmother's wishes. It seemed to her that the chief became sympathetic to Vanessa. So, in casual conversation, they reached the place. Before their eyes spread out a huge natural park with powerful paths, with majestic towers, castles, fortresses, and shuttles between them, corridors and carts. The charioteer gave a few hundred and got to any object with a breeze. And in the center of the cultural site, on a high mountain, stood the majestic figure of a new serpent, which at the appointed time spewed out streams of fire. The travelers visited all the art objects they liked, had lunch in a stylized Korchevnikov's, admired the final exit of the old Russian dragon, bathed in the local river. In general, they were satisfied. Happy and tired, they went on their way back. Stephen was jubilant. Wendy had spent the whole day with him. She smiled, took him under her arm, and discussed her impressions. Vanessa, too, had made a favorable impression on him. He expected to see a decrepit old woman, but met a vigorous, neat woman. He could talk to her on any subject. With these two ladies, he felt at home freely and easily. He didn't even have to control his emotions or restrain his impulses. He too acted like a child and enjoyed the fabulous outing. In the late afternoon, Stephen delivered Wendy and her grandmother home and went to his own place. He was light and happy at heart. The man was content and caught himself thinking that he felt good about being able to give such a trip to the girl his heart desired. After this trip, their relationship began to develop rapidly. There was warmth, respect, and care. Stephen was thrilled to realize that Wendy also cared for him. It gave him so much energy that he felt as if he were not walking, but simply floating above the ground. Time passed, and gradually they grew closer and closer. And soon one remarkable incident occurred which enabled Stephen to be convinced of the correctness of his choice. When the city was covered with snowy winter and cold winds, forgot in its streets, he caught a bad cold, with a high fever and skinny chills gripping his entire body. At the height of the infection, he called Nancy and told her he would be gone for several days. The man's condition kept worsening, and soon he slipped into oblivion alone in the apartment, completely helpless. Stephen perceived the sounds of the television and telephone as if through a jenna of thick fog. He was no longer able to even stick a thermometer under his arm. The patient was losing touch with reality. The only one who sounded the alarm was Wendy. She convinced Nancy to give her a spare key to Stephen's apartment. It was kept in the study just in case. She rushed over to her boss's house. The girl was shocked by what she saw. She immediately called an ambulance, and Stephen was hospitalized. Wendy arrived at his apartment just in time, because the timely treatment helped him to avoid complications. According to the doctor, they were sure to threaten a man weakened by infection. Every day the girl visited the patient and made sure to bring fruit. And hello from Vanessa. Feeling her care and presence, Stephen recovered quickly. Soon he was discharged, although he spent another week at home. During this time, the man got so used to the closeness of his favorite girl that he did not want to part with her even for a while. He came to the realization that he would like to see Wendy as his wife. He needed her like air. On his return to the office, Stephen set to work with renewed vigor. He decided to propose to Wendy. The night before, the man left his office and approached her workplace. "Wendy, I need to discuss some work issues with you, but not in the office, but tonight at the Orpheus restaurant. I'd like you to be ready at 9 o'clock. I'll pick you up. Dress code. Parade objections will not be accepted." That's not a request. That's an instruction. Wendy was surprised at the way he spoke to her, but did not object. "It will be carried out to the best of my ability." "Not to worry," she replied theatrically, continuing to type on the keyboard. When they arrived at the restaurant, a table had already been set for them. Wendy had been with Stephen in various places before and was therefore surprised by the unusual service. In the middle, she saw a beautiful vase with a voluminous flower arrangement. "You said it was a business occasion. Why flowers?" The girl was surprised. "And this you will find out later." "Mademoiselle," he slyly smiled. Then the wonderful voice of Paul McCartney was heard in one of the speakers. Stephen stretched out his hand to meet her and offered to dance. They twirled around the floor. Stephen gently embraced her and could not believe it was real. Sunny and warm vibes emanated from her. Wonderful hair spread across her shoulders. Her blue eyes glowed with happiness, and her body gave out desires. The song ended. He gallantly led her to a table. Wendy sat down. "You know," Stephen began, "I'm frankly admiring you right now. I don't think there's a more beautiful woman in the world. I'll tell you the truth. You're probably the only woman I have any genuine respect for. You know everything about me. I'm no saint. Sometimes I've been ridiculous and stupid. Yes, I remember your indecent proposal." Wendy laughed. "And I remember what you were wearing at the hour of our first intimate date." Stephen smiled broadly. "But I'm grateful to your outfit for drawing my attention to you. But the time has come when you are not shy of me at all, and I want you to be my wife." He opened his palm with a dainty ring hidden in it. "Well, I'm a saint. All that remains is to ask Vanessa's blessing." Wendy raised her matchless cornflower eyes to him, and he saw in them so much love and tenderness that his heart leaped with happiness. "Can you imagine? I agree. Because from the very beginning I couldn't refuse any of your offers, even from indecent." The girl squinted slyly. "That's the effect you have on me. You could say, hypnotically. I am ready to sacrifice all my principles and morals. Vanessa has long ago figured you out. 6 months ago, and you charmed her from the first moment you met her. So I take it that's a complete agreement." "That's right. You, Stephen, understand. Give me your ring." Stephen complied with his beloved's request, and on this occasion they drank 2 bottles of champagne, then had a delicious dinner and several times twirled in a slow dance. Stephen remembered how unsophisticated Wendy used to be, and he desired her more than anything else in the world. Very delicately and carefully, he was teaching her to open herself up to passion. But it wasn't even about intimacy. Although their physical union was getting better and better each time, Stephen felt in Wendy an absolute kinsman. This beautiful girl had found a place for him in her soul. She was truly his other half. Stephen felt responsible for a woman for the first time and did not avoid her. He was ready to fight back hard for encroaching on his girlfriend's insecurities. No one in his presence would offend Wendy by word or deed. She was completely under his protection, and it was from her that the man felt a mental and physical togetherness that could only be dreamed of. How had this girl managed to win him over? He did not understand. What fascinated him was Wendy's sincerity and selflessness. She really gave Stephen the kind of attention and care that he had dreamed of as a child and received only from his father. Only now in this affair with Wendy, he realized that Prochor had managed to plant in him his best life principles. So he valued simple human values: mutual love, respect, sincere care for each other. A difficult childhood and frivolous youth pushed all this into the background and replaced it with phantom attachments. But neither success nor money could make Stephen happy. Only his relationship with Wendy had brought harmony and peace to his soul. Only now he realized what a pleasure it is to live in balance with himself, when not passions tear your soul, but tenderness and delight. They fill it all around. Nature, people, and everyday affairs become completely different. The very perception of the world changes. Stephen looked at her now with gratitude. Yes, it is not an easy world, and it is not simple, but it is what it is. When the fire of true love burns inside you, then philosophically perceive the difficulties and vicissitudes of life. Indulge in other people's shortcomings goes irritability, nervousness, using sometimes envy of other people's happiness. Stephen now realized how much good lurked in his soul, and there was no one to give it to. In fact, no one was taking it. And Wendy really needed his care, attention, and adoration. Her adoring gaze reflected her love for him. She must have sensed something real that had always been hidden in him. The girl trusted Stephen so infinitely that to deceive her, he could not deceive her. He realized clearly that Wendy was the cornerstone through which he had come to love life itself in all its incarnations. With her, he had discovered one immutable truth. He was giving himself to her and deriving great pleasure from it. Next to her, he became the real, the very sincere and desperate boy in whom his father had infinitely believed. The morning they met together in the large and bright bedroom, Stephen opened himself even more to Wendy. Putting his arms around her, he said, "You do not even realize how amazing you are, outwardly seemingly weak and fragile, but at heart strong and kind. You're the one who made me a better person. And that's not just a buzzword. It's the truth. I not only fell in love with a beautiful woman, but through you I became real. I got my self-respect back. Gone are the resentments, the fears. Through you, I've come to love the world. I have no complaints about it. It's given me such happiness. You have no idea how good it feels to be with you. I can't explain it to you, but I can show you." And he brought it to her lips in a passionate kiss. After a while, their private life became such that Stephen was breathtaking. For this, he was grateful to Wendy. She enjoyed learning all the intricacies of a close relationship between a man and a woman. Stephen sometimes became wildly frightened that he could pass it by. That and sobbing on the bench girls. He thanked God and fate that by some instinct he had seen the gorgeous woman hidden in this humble poor girl. Wendy had turned out to be a splendid wife. She was not afraid to quit her job and become a housewife, organizing everyday life and recreation for her beloved. Brought her great pleasure. The woman did not regret this step because one by one they had children, a healthy, strong boy, Rick with the same marvelous eyes, just like their mother's, and then a searing brunette with clear brown eyes, just like Daddy. They say girls who look like their fathers grow up happy, and vice versa. Boys who are lucky enough to inherit their mother's looks also become lucky. Stephen felt perfectly at home as a husband and father. He felt at ease, actively realized in the professional sphere, and was the main provider in the family. Even in his strict schedule, he was sure to allocate time to communicate with children when they grew up. On an equal footing with his wife, he attended parent-teacher conferences, participated in school life, took them to sections and additional classes. Vanessa lived to see his great-grandchildren and had time to nurse them. This kind woman passed away at the age of 90. Her soul departed peacefully to the kingdom of heaven in her sleep. During her lifetime, she refused to move in with the young and remained in her old home. Stephen did his best to make it more comfortable and sympathetic. He showed her respect to the end of the woman's life and considered her a kindred spirit. Thanks to his personal happiness, he was able to let go of his resentments toward his mother and remember the isolated moments of happiness she was able to give him. Celebrating the anniversary of their acquaintance, the Faber family recalled the incident of the indecent proposal and all the consequences that followed. A grateful heart now beat in Stephen's chest. He had grown to love the rain. One day, he came out of the office and realized that a downpour was about to break out. The scent was hard to describe. It smelled, especially a variety in foreign lands, and intensified with every minute. A lightning bolt flashed, like a flaming branch in a fire. It was followed by thunder. Droplets swiftly approached the ground and bombarded leaves, flowers, and grasses. Music was playing in my head. Stephen looked at the rain and saw a miracle. He admired how the raindrops gently touched the delicate greenery and tenderly, but washed away the flowers and hid in the thick grass. A heavy rain filled the street. It was in moderation, moving in rhythm and ringing. The August rain is young, and he cannot understand the wisdom of autumn. Men invite his youth and realized that he himself had entered the season of wise maturity. Stephen felt like raising his arms towards him and shouting to be heard. I'm a happy man. I feel crazy good. I love and am loved. Suddenly, the sky brightened, and the sun appeared from behind the clouds. Stephen, satisfied with the games of nature, and himself looked around and was pleased with the result. It seemed to him that the trees were younger and the flowers smelled sweeter. He looked up. The clouds were flying away, slowly turning into intricate shapes, and a bright star named the sun lit up. And we will wait for the pure world.